Welcome back to Not Mine, friends. I really need to come up with a different name for these videos. I'm basically just copying Nick Nocturne at this point. But anyway. All across the United States, there are sprawling forests and weaving creeks, with all different manner of living things, from giant grizzly bears to tiny salamanders, and all things in between. With this large amount of organisms throughout the world, it's hard to believe that nearly 15,000 new species are discovered each year. With all the new species found each year, it's reasonable to think there are plenty in the United States that are undiscovered. This possibility is often used to promote the existence of many cryptids. Could Bigfoot be an undiscovered primate? Could the Mothman be an undiscovered giant moth? In fact, the Kraken of medieval legends was discovered as a colossal squid. With this in mind, can we apply the same treatment to a lesser-known cryptid to prove if it's real or not for ourselves? The Loveland Frog, a giant magical frog that uses a magic wand and terrorizes police officers. The Loveland Frogman of Ohio originates in 1955. The exact date is unknown. Some versions of the story say it was around May. And there are three prevailing versions of the original story. They all start the same. A businessman was driving along a road in Loveland, Ohio, around 3 a.m. when he saw a group of 3 figures along the side of the road, each about 3 to 4 feet tall. Each was standing on 2 hind legs with leathery skin, webbed hands and feet, and the head of a frog or toad. The businessman pulled over to the side of the road to get a better look at the creatures. He watched them converse for a short time, after which one of them raised a wand over its head and let loose a spray of sparks, which startled the businessman into fleeing. The other versions differ mostly on the location of where the creatures were seen. Instead of on the side of the road, some versions say it was on or under a bridge. That's where the 1955 story ends. It's not known who the businessman was or who originally told the story, but the legend continued and festered in the minds of Loveland residents until the next sighting almost 20 years later. This time, the little frogmen were seen by Loveland police, so there was much more reputable information on this sighting. On March 3, 1972, around 1 a.m., Loveland police officer Ray Shockey was driving along Riverside Drive. He claimed the conditions were icy, so he was driving slowly, when a creature suddenly scurried across the road in front of his car. He slammed on the brakes, leaving the creature illuminated by his headlights. He said the creature was crouched like a giant frog, but stood up on 2 hind legs and stared directly at him. He described the creature as 3 to 4 feet tall, around 50 to 75 pounds. I guess he could just tell that by looking, but he's a police officer, so I guess that's fine. And it also had leathery skin. It quickly scrambled over the guardrail and disappeared into the Little Miami River. Later, Ray Shockey called another officer, Mark Matthews, to tell him what he had seen. Of course, Mark was skeptical, but he could tell that Ray Shockey was shaken up by something. Supposedly, later, Other officers found scratches and dents on the guardrail. This sighting was similar to the 1955 story. However, that's not where this one ends. A few weeks later, on St. Patrick's Day, Mark Matthews was driving along Kemper Road near the old Totes Boot Factory when he saw the creature himself. It was lying near the side of the road. Mark assumed it was a dead animal, so he stopped his car to remove the carcass. As he approached, it suddenly stood up and startled him. He fired his weapon at the creature, but it scrambled off into the forest. He corroborated the description of the creature with Ray Shockey later on. And that's where this story ends. For now, at least. About 40 years later, in 2016, Sam Jacobs and his girlfriend were playing Pokemon Go around Lake Isabella when they saw a giant frog swimming through the lake. The creature stood up on two legs and stared at the couple. Sam took out his phone and took a few photos and a short video. Here is that short video. Yeah, not a lot to work with here, Sam. However, that's not where this story ends either. Not long after the 2016 sighting was covered on the local news, Mark Matthews, from the 1972 sighting, called into the news channel to relay what actually happened that night. He changed his story and said that he actually did shoot and kill the creature he saw that night, and even collected the body. He brought it to Ray Shockey, and together they found the creature was actually a large 3-foot iguana missing its tail. Mark theorized that it was someone's pet they released after it got too large to take care of, and had been living near the boot factory because it was warmer. Mark Matthews claimed that when he originally relayed the story to the one who broke it in 1972, he told them about the fact it was an iguana, but the author chose to leave it out. And that's where the legend of the Loveland Frog Man ends for now. No more notable sightings have been reported, and no other explanations have been offered. But I'm not satisfied with the large iguana story. After all, the only type of iguana that even grows close to 3 feet long is a marine iguana, and I think it's safe to say that no one in urban Loveland, Ohio owned a marine iguana. But also, that 3.3 foot length they grow to includes their tail, and Mark affirmed that the iguana was missing a tail. So if it really was an iguana, it would be a freakishly huge iguana. Plus, if Mark had actually killed and collected the body of this giant iguana, what did he do with it? Why wasn't a huge iguana found in Loveland a news story? Clearly, Mark's story has some problems. In fact, a large 3-foot iguana would be closer to the giant lizard of Milton, Kentucky, which was seen 3 years after Mark and Ray Shockey's sighting, or the lizard man of Scape Ore Swamp, which was seen in the 80s after attacking a car. Based off the description of these creatures, there seems to be no connection. However, there was another cryptid sighting with a possible connection that took place in the summer of 1955, in the same year of the original Loveland Frog sighting. In the summer of 1955, the police were called to a home in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where 2 families were trapped inside their house and being harassed by alien creatures since dusk. They had been fighting the creatures by shooting at them. Earlier that night, strange lights had been reported in the sky, and one of the fathers of the family reported that around 7 p.m. he saw a flying saucer land in the woods. Soon after seeing this flying saucer land, they began hearing noises coming from the woods, and small, alien creatures emerged. The families shot at the creatures, but they were resistant to bullets. The creatures were about 3 feet tall with silvery skin and clawed hands. A few were able to flee the house to drive to the police station, where they quickly returned to find no creatures in sight, with heavy damage to the house and strange glowing green slime on a wooden fence. Police remained for about 2 hours and then left. Around 3 a.m. the creatures apparently returned, but the family did not shoot at them, and they heard scratching on the walls and roof. The family left the house for Illinois because they were so afraid. Eventually, it came to light that the damage and intensity of the encounter was greatly exaggerated. The only damage done to the house was a single bullet hole found in the screen door from a .22, and supposedly there were only 4 shots fired. And reasonable explanations for most things that happened have been offered. The creatures could have just been great horned owls, and the green slime on the fence could have just been foxfire, a well-known fungus that grows in the area and has bioluminescent properties. Now, what does this have to do with the Loveland Frog? The descriptions of the creatures and the events are totally different. Well, I believe this event could have served as inspiration for the Loveland Frog encounter. The Kelly Hopkinsville encounter received a lot of media attention. However, there is one main issue. The Kelly Hopkinsville encounter happened in August, and supposedly the Loveland Frogman encounter happened in May. If this fact is true, and the original Loveland Frogman sighting did occur in May, then that would disprove any connection between the two. However, there is still the possibility that this businessman, who originally saw the Loveland Frogman, was entirely fabricated. If that's so, the person who created this story of the Loveland Frogman could have just lied about the month that it took place as well, to make it more believable, so that anyone who heard the story would not call them out on saying they copied the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. There is one more cryptid encounter, which took place in 1951, that could have a connection. The Flatwoods Monster was another alien creature seen by a few children in West Virginia. The descriptions of the creatures don't match very well, but once again, this story was widely covered by the media. These two widely covered stories about monstrous cryptids could have given inspiration for someone in Loveland, Ohio, to fabricate the entire creature of the Loveland Frogman. But no! I still refuse to believe it could be that simple. Someone creating a legend of a monster to create media coverage. There must be some other evidence to prove that Loveland Frogman is real. If we look back far enough into the very people who lived there long before, could we possibly find evidence that the Loveland Frog was a known creature? The Shawnee tribe was the largest Native American tribe that settled in Ohio. They had several legends about different spirits and creatures that could be connected to the Loveland Frog. The water panther, or Mishipeshu, was supposedly a creature similar to a cougar mixed with a dragon. Certain tales describe it as possibly the size of a small dog, while some describe it as gigantic. Obviously, descriptions vary greatly, from a fur-covered beast with a copper-coated tail to a spiked reptile, so it doesn't seem like this creature could have been the Loveland Frog. The Choctaw Native Americans of the southeast and the Iroquois of the northeast have similar tales of little people. They are usually described as mischievous beings that are around 4 feet tall. Nearly in every description they live in deep forests and harass anyone who enters too deeply. However, I couldn't find anything that described them as reptilian or frog-like, so I suppose we should look elsewhere. In the Midwest tribes, there were tales of water babies, usually described as small reptilian or fish-like beings that would lure people into lakes to drown them. Could this possibly have been the Loveland Frog? The tales of water babies aren't from tribes that lived around here, and the legends say they are usually described looking more like actual babies. All the encounters with the Loveland Frog had never been one trying to lure people into the river, so I guess there's no connections to be found here. Well, after everything, the original story, the possible connections to other cryptids, and legends from Native Americans that lived around this area, it seems there really isn't much else that can be used to help prove the existence of the Loveland Frog. It seems likely that this businessman, who saw the Loveland Frog for the first time in 1955, could have just heard about previous cryptid encounters from that year or 1952, and completely fabricated it. Maybe this businessman himself was completely fabricated as well, and the story was used to just get attention. While I'm not certain what Ray Shockey and Mark Matthews saw that March evening, I believe it's a possibility that they fabricated their story as well, and later on, Mark decided to undo the lie and prove it was a hoax. Or perhaps they truly did see something, but it simply could have been a coyote with mange, or some other similar animal. Or possibly could have been the iguana that had grown larger than normal living in the wild. And the 2016 encounter, well, it easily could have been faked in this day and age, with a suit and lights to create the figure as seen in the picture. There's just such a lack of conclusive evidence. There's only eyewitness testimony, and eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of evidence, that it's so hard to prove that this frog could be real or not. But what if I were to tell you that despite everything, despite all the evidence that it has against it, the Loveland Frog is real. He is real, and I am going to find it.